has a comment. Go ahead, Sean.
I'm sorry for interrupting. We are going to start the recording, and so you might get a pop-up.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it failed earlier. Thank you.
All right. Great. Thank you. So, any other questions for Wayland Council?
If I could add one
Go
more.
ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Backus, for providing insight on that change today. I wasn't quite clear on that, but yeah, that was the 2 alternate members. That's what I was a little confused about. Thank you.
Thank you. And Council, I do believe that again, when we come into our budgeting season, if and when we are allowed to go back into National League of Cities in person, which could be some time, but that will be a budget consideration that is presented through the mayor's budget and director's budget. And then, as we know, is adopted by council. So that's part of the process as we go through for determining the number of junior city council members that would be allowed to attend National League of Cities. So it's pretty much a budget item overall. And council, I will ask the question, since this is a minor change of just adding back 2 alternate members where it was 9, do you want this to come back to study session, or are we okay to go forward with this at city council next week? Just a head nod would be fine to go forward to city council. Okay, looks like we have a consensus to do that. So we look forward to having this next week at city council. All right. Wayland, thank you very much as always. And we shall see you next week. Okay, the next item on our agenda is ordinance number 6835 with Director Daub.
Good evening, and I'm actually going to have Lisa Tobin talk to you about this ordinance change. So, Lisa.
Good morning, council, or good evening, council members. Good evening, Mayor. I'm, as Ingrid said, I'm Lisa Tobin. I'm the Utilities Engineering Manager. And tonight we're asking you to consider a small change to the city code that clarifies when water and sewer service has been disconnected from our systems. The date of disconnection is important because any property that has been disconnected from our system for 5 years or more is considered an abandoned service. And when that property is ready to reconnect to our system, they have to pay all utility service charges and fees as though they were a new customer, because they have not been paying into the system to help maintain it during the time when they were not a customer. So currently the code states that disconnection occurs when the city actually physically removes the water meter, and then the service billing stops. However, sometimes the property owner knows that they're eventually going to redevelop the property, and they ask us to just lock off the water meter instead. And right now the code doesn't provide for that to be considered as a disconnection. So what we're asking you to consider with ordinance number 6835 is that we slightly revise the wording in the water and sewer city code sections to add the words lock off to either lock off or remove the meter, and to establish the date of disconnection as the date that the service billing stops. So if this change is acceptable, we plan to submit the ordinance to you for your consideration at next Monday's council meeting. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you've got.
Questions for Lisa, council? Councilmember J. Raj.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Lisa, thank you very much for the update on the meter. Now, the question that I have is, when you say it's going to take 5 years before we charge them for not maintaining the service, right? When we remove the meters, then say, for instance, within the 5-year period, they want to put the meter back on, do we charge them for that?
We would charge them to reinstall the meter, but it would go back in the existing box.
Say that again, please.
Yes, we would reinstall the meter. Now, if we had abandoned the service, we would have to reinstall it, and they may have to pay that charge. The biggest change is going to be with the system development charges. That is a large charge that has our customers paying for system renewal and replacement and expansion of the system. And so that is the principal charge that we need to be collecting when people have not been paying in to support the system on a month-to-month basis.
Okay, so it doesn't have to do with the meter itself then?
It does have to do with the meter itself. They would pay for whatever service we were providing, whether it was to install the meter back in the box or to actually reinstall the entire service. But they wouldn't be required to pay the system development charges unless the meter had been removed for a period of 5 years. Thank you for that.
I understand. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Lisa? Okay, not seeing any. Lisa, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, next we will move into our next item on Sidewalk Repair Program, again with Director Gaub.
All right, and I'm actually going to have Cecile Malik, our Senior Transportation Planner, run through with you what our Sidewalk Repair Program is. This is a new program that we're hoping to implement, so we wanted to talk to you about it tonight, as it would actually need to be incorporated into our fee schedule. So, Cecile?
Good evening, council members. Let me share my screen. All right, are you all able to see my screen? Yes, perfect, thank you. All right, so tonight I'm going to talk to you about a proposed new sidewalk repair program. This, so sometimes when you have vegetation, it's mainly trees planted next to sidewalks. Occasionally, these trees or vegetation will cause damage to the sidewalk, and this damage can cause some accessibility obstruction. When this vegetation that's causing this damage is located on private property, it is the responsibility of the property owner to repair the damaged sidewalk. So the way it works right now, when the city is notified of the issue, we will provide a temporary repair, and then we will notify the property owner of the issue, notify them that they are responsible for this repair to the sidewalk, which usually includes removal of the roots or the tree, whatever is causing the issue that needs to be removed. And then the property owners need to find a contractor, hire a contractor, which the contractor will need to obtain a construction permit to replace the damaged sidewalk. So it seems pretty straightforward. These are some examples of temporary repair so that you have an idea of what we're talking about. So what we do as a city when we have issues of damaged sidewalk, will come out and will provide either a patch with asphalt or grind the edge of lifted sidewalks. And it really depends on the situation, what's needed. So because it's not a perfect system, over the years, we've identified some issues to our process. One of the issues is that it can be really difficult for property owners to find a contractor who is willing to come out for such a small project as the replacement of 1 or 2 sidewalk panels. And when they do find a contractor who is willing to come, the cost can be prohibitive, because just for the contractor to come out to the project, there is a minimum price. And so what we found is that it usually comes around $50 to $80 per square foot, which translates to $2,500 to $4,000 just for the replacement of 1 sidewalk panel, 5 by 10 foot. The impact on the right-of-way is that it can take a really long time for property owners, 1, to find a contractor, and 2, to find the resource to pay for the sidewalk replacement. And so while we wait for this to take place, for the permanent repair to take place, we'll have to keep going back to provide temporary repair. We'll have to keep working with the property owners to try to help them the best we can. And then sometimes property owners will just not be willing or able to provide that repair. That could lead to going into a code enforcement action, which could lead to a lien against the property, which has not happened yet, but it could in the process. We do try to work with our property owners, but these are some issues. So to address these issues, we have come up with a potential solution. And the solution will be to help the property owners by giving them the benefits of a larger citywide project. So every year the city does sidewalk replacement, sidewalk repair, build sidewalk gaps, etc. And because of this large scale project, our price per square foot is much lower than that of a small project. And so what we're proposing is to offer the option to property owners who have to replace their sidewalk, the sidewalk adjacent to their property that their vegetation has damaged, give them the option to pay a fee to the city so that we could include their sidewalk replacement into the citywide program. And based on last year's cost, that will bring the cost down to about $20 per square foot or $1,000 for a sidewalk panel that is 5 by 10 foot to compare. And having this option not only would help decrease the cost for the property owners, it will also decrease the stress of having to find a contractor. And for the city, the advantage is that if property owners are able to opt into that program, then we will know that these sidewalk panels will be replaced and we won't have to worry about having to keep contacting the property owners. And that will also make that communication easier when we are notifying them of the issue and also giving them more options. Now, the tree removals will still remain the property owner's responsibility if that's necessary. And to date, that hasn't been an issue. The issue that has been coming up is the sidewalk replacement. We usually give property owners the option of keeping the tree and just removing the roots. But in that process, we do ask them to accept the responsibility of potential future damage caused by the tree, because there's always a risk when you just remove the roots, and you have to monitor the health of the tree and make sure that if the tree dies, for example, in the future, that it is removed. So we would work with the property owner on that. And if only the tree roots need to be removed under the sidewalk panel during the project, that cost is already included in the cost of the project. So the sidewalk repair program is actually the sidewalk repair and accessibility program, very long term. It is a project adopted in the TIP, Project N2, which is funded by the 328 General Fund. So in addition to providing sidewalk repair, this program also builds new curb ramps where no curb exists, where no curb ramps exist, or replaces curb ramps that do not meet ADA requirements. It's also used to fill sidewalk gaps. The funding for this program is also used for grant matching for other pedestrian improvement projects. And the funding for this program comes from REIT funds, where $220,000 are allocated each year to this program. And there's also $50,000 allocated to this program from the CDBG fund. So the proposed program will keep all of these elements and add the sidewalk repair for the property owners who elect to pay that fee to be included into the program. And so the next step will be to, if we move forward with this program, which I hope we do, we will have to update this 2022 fee schedule to add the sidewalk replacement fee as an option. Pretty soon you'll be presented with budget amendment 4, which will have an amendment to add the estimated revenue and expenditure to the 2022 budget. And if all of this is approved, then we could start collecting funds in 2022 for projects which will be included in the 2023 sidewalk repair program. And why there is a year delay is because it takes time to collect the funds and put the program locations and design together to then go out to bid for the next year. So there will always be a bit of a delay, but that is in a nutshell the proposed program, and I am ready for questions. I will stop sharing.
Oh, Cecile, question on the proposed cost. How was the $20 per square foot, the $1,000 for the 5 by 10 foot panel? How was that arrived at?
So I looked at last year's sidewalk repair program, and I worked with our capital project managers, and we calculated based on the bids that were received how much this was broken down into a square foot cost, and that includes everything from design to all the way to building the improvements.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Baggett.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Cecile, I had a question relative to the existing 16 that we've identified that need to be replaced. I don't think those things from those pictures look like they could wait till 2023 to be done. How will we accomplish those?
Right. No, the pictures you saw are just some examples that I found on some that are open, some that are closed. The worst ones, it was just illustrative. The very first one, this one is actually already complete. We worked with the property owner, I think it was a couple of years ago. Yeah, this one we couldn't even provide a temporary repair. And usually we find those out before they get that bad, but sometimes we just don't.
So the existing ones that are part of that 16, I guess that's going to be under the current ground rules. Is that correct?
Well, you know, those that are currently open, we have been giving them a lot of time extension because it does have an impact on people. If we move forward with this program, we will give them the option to enroll into that program.
Okay, I just want to be fair to the homeowners where those sidewalks are right in front of their property, that we are making some offering there to help and ease some of those costs, because that can be exorbitant.
Yes, absolutely. And so that's why we've been holding off in pushing too much those most recent affected property owners, because we're hoping that we could move forward with this program and really alleviate that impact.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate that.
And we have more now than 16. Actually, I think we're at 18 from the time that I made the slides. So it changes.
And if I can add to that, so as far as maintaining that sidewalk accessibility, so our maintenance staff still go out and deal with any temporary measures that might be needed until the actual permanent repair is done. So we don't stop doing that just because we've done it once. We do go back and check as we need to make sure that those repairs are still appropriate.
Councilmember J. Raj.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Cecile, thank you for the presentation. My question is I see this at the last slide. You say start collecting funds in 2022. Who's going to be, are you going to charge for collecting funds? I mean, who are you collecting funds from? The city, everybody in the city, or just the 16 or 18 people?
It will just be, so we would contact the property owners who are required to replace the sidewalk that their vegetation damaged, and we will give them that option. Would you like the option to pay us a fee to include this sidewalk replacement into our program instead of having to find your own contractor? And they will decide. There will be no requirement for them to opt into this program. They could, if they wanted, just decide to go on their own and find a contractor and take care of the sidewalk replacement. But it is geared to those affected property owners who have vegetation that have damaged the sidewalk.
Okay.
And it will apply to future ones as well. So new property owners that have vegetation moving forward into the future. So every year we find more and more such issues, and that will give us that option to help people to make it more affordable.
As the vegetation damages the sidewalk.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Trumano, do you still have a question?
No, I don't. You asked the question I was going to ask, and
Okay.
then I thought I was going to go before Mr. Baggett, but he asked the question I was going to ask, and then Ingrid answered all of them. So thank you very much, and thank you for what a great presentation, and making sure that our constituents are having the opportunity to be able to get their sidewalks taken care of. Thank you.
Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think I missed the part. You said there are 16 sidewalks that need to be repaired?
Yes, actually, yeah, in my presentation, I had a little note that said currently we have 16 locations with damaged sidewalk waiting to be repaired.
Is that
Actually,
like 16 panels?
No, some locations have 1 or 2, some have 3 or 4. We have a location where it's a very long block.
Okay. It's a pretty big city. I mean, how did you find those, or how do we inventory those?
Yes, so in different ways. Sometimes people will call into our maintenance and operations phone line to say, I saw that this sidewalk panel is lifted, and they will report it. Sometimes we will be working on projects and notice that a nearby sidewalk is damaged. But a lot of times, the majority of the time, we find out about those from calls from residents when they're walking and they're finding either they tripped on it or they just noticed it and said, hey, this is a lifted sidewalk or a damaged sidewalk, can you please take care of it? And so our maintenance and operations department will send the street crews out to provide temporary repair, and then they will let my group know. And then we will start working with the property owner to provide a permanent repair.
So do you think people will be less likely to report sidewalks that need repair if they understand that they're going to have to pay for it?
Well, they already have to pay for it. So
Right, but that's only if you catch them. And there are only 16 spots out of an 80,000 person city.
Well, that we know of. There's been many over the years where we've had to work with property owners to repair. And so that doesn't change the fact that we're going to find more and more locations that are damaged over time. And we're going to have to contact property owners, except what is changing is that instead of the property owners having to find their own contractor and having to find sometimes exorbitant amount of money to pay for that, we would give them an alternative option for a lower fee for us to provide that sidewalk replacement at our cost because we have an annual project already doing that.
Wait, I missed, I'm sorry, did you just say we already
Yes.
offer property owners a lower?
No, we don't yet. That's
We
what
don't
we
yet.
want to do.
Okay, and I just the last thing is that, I mean, so going back to the first point, it just seems like we have an inventory system. It's just the inputs are kind of a little bit whatever haphazard. But there is a system where we
Yes.
have an inventory. Okay,
Yes, we
so
do.
then can you give me a sense then of, you know, I'm actually I live on a street where there were a whole bunch of tree removals that the city did not too long ago, you know, to
Yes.
protect the sidewalk.
Yeah.
None of the homeowners, you know, it was the developer that put the trees in, like literally, you know, a foot away from the sidewalk, if that. And I'm not sure if that's something that, you know, when I bought a house here, I'm not on the side of the street that had the trees, so it wasn't in my inspection report, but I'm not sure if it was in theirs, but I think they were kind of freaked out, more just losing their trees than, you know, getting a bill, but they might have gotten a bill. I don't know.
So
If I can clarify on that particular situation, Councilmember Stearns,
Yeah.
we're only talking about private vegetation that damages the sidewalk. In that particular situation, many of those sidewalks that were damaged were from the street tree in what is the public's ownership of that tree. So that's a different situation. That's where we're addressing that situation on our own. So the situation we're talking about for this program is where that tree on the private property is what's causing that damage.
Oh, okay, great. So that, I mean, yeah, so then the developer just put it on the public spot.
Yeah, so in that particular location, those trees were, for the most part, located in the planting strip between the sidewalk and the roadway. And so any damage caused by those trees, we typically address. This is what we're talking about for this program, is where those trees are located behind the sidewalk on your property as a property owner, and they're causing damage to that sidewalk.
Right, okay. So can you give me a sense then of, you know, how much less it would be
Yes,
with the new program?
So currently what we've estimated is that just one sidewalk panel that's about 5 foot by 10 foot will cost the property owner between $2,500 and $4,000
What?
to replace. Between $2,500 and $4,000.
Oh, 4,000.
Just for one panel. So it would be double for 2 panels. What we're proposing is about $1,000 for a sidewalk panel. And not having to find a contractor themselves.
Okay, so that's like more than 50%. That's
correct.
Okay, yeah. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Cecile, Council? Okay, not seeing any. Cecile, good to see you again. Thank you very much for the report. Excellent job. Ingrid, thank you. Okay, well, now we've moved into our discussion item related to second quarter 2021 financial report with Director Thomas.
Thank you. Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. It's that time again where I get to talk about our quarterly update. Can you guys see my screen okay? Okay, excellent. So this is for second quarter 2021. Now if we can get it to advance. There we go. I'm going to just run through on page 28 of your agenda packet is actually the beginning of the full second quarter financial report. So if you want to see all of the details, some further explanation on some of the revenue streams that are a little bit smaller, you're more than welcome to look there. I'm going to just really do the overview of the significant revenue accounts, as well as the accounts that have significant variances between the budget, as well as significant variances to 2020. On this slide is really a summary of the overall summary. I took and I condensed a lot of those revenue accounts into major revenue categories. I'm focusing on the light blue column, which is the variance to budget, which shows our favorable or unfavorable variance both for revenues and expenditures. So you can see towards the bottom, our total revenues at the end of Q2 are favorable by $4.9 million, and our expenditures are favorable by $5.2 million. So that means that we have collected $4.9 million in revenue more, and we have spent $5.2 million less than we had anticipated to up to this point in 2021. Running down the revenues really quick, just high level, property tax, we're trending above, but as you know, we set our property tax rate at the beginning or in October, November of the year before. It's set at $22.4 million. We anticipate to collect our full $22.4 million and not anything more than that. Any variance right now, it just has to do with a timing issue, and we've actually collected those property taxes from King County. Sales tax is a very large number. We'll dive into that a little bit deeper, but just on the high level of the reason we're trending so much favorable to budget, as we've talked about a few times when we were developing the 2021-2022 budget, we had budgeted for a recession, and we haven't seen a recession so far yet in 2021. So that's the primary reason we're outperforming that. Utility tax, we're right really at budget, just a slightly under budget, which is actually a catch up from where we were in Q1. We'll look at those numbers in a little bit more detail later. Our building permits and our other licenses and permits are really related to development activity, also then tied to our sales tax activity as well. So just that development activity is driving some of our sales tax activity. Intergovernmental revenue, what you're going to see on this summary, I'm showing a favorable to budget by $901,000. If you're actually looking at the detail numbers on page 29 of your agenda packet, it's actually going to show more than that. It's going to show over $8 million. And that's because that is including our ARPA funding. And we will be doing a budget amendment to move ARPA funding out of the general fund. And so for just comparison purposes, I wanted to pull that $7.3 million that we received in ARPA funding this year out of the equation, because that's got a whole different spending source, a whole different revenue source. And I don't want to get that confused with actual general fund revenue. Our charges for service are outperforming our budget, and we'll break that down into the forming categories for our charges for service later. And then total expenditures, $5.2 million favorable. This is very common for us to have an underspend. Our underspend has been a little bit higher, both in 2020 as well as 2021 than it did in prior years. And this is really attributed to salary savings, really for most all departments across the board. We do have 2 departments that have a larger amount of savings year to date than others, and that's the police department and the Parks, Art, and Recreation. They both are under budget right now in spending by $1.5 million. Again, really attributed to staffing turnover, shortages, attrition, and it makes sense that those would be the 2 departments that have the largest savings, because they also are our largest departments as far as budget in the general fund. So relative, we're all kind of about the same as far as our salary savings goes for our departments. So jumping into more detail with our retail sales tax. Just a reminder that there's a 2-month delay in how we collect our retail sales tax from the Department of Revenue. So what we see through our Q2 is actually November 2020 through April 2021 activity. You can see by both the graph and the numbers that we are outperforming our budget by $1.9 million or $2.5 million, and we're overperforming the prior year by $1.9 million. On October 25th, we come to council with what we call the Mid-Biennial budget adjustment. So by law, we adopt a biennial budget. So we're trying to project revenues for 2 years out, as well as expenditures for 2 years out, but we're required in the off year to do what they call like a revenue true up, a revenue review and a true up of the budget. So when we come to council on October 25th, we're going to be doing analysis of what our major revenue sources have been doing. And clearly our retail sales tax hasn't done what we had conservatively estimated for in 2021. So we will be adjusting the 2022 budget to more closely reflect what we're seeing this year. So hopefully we don't see such a large, I mean, although it's in the right direction, we're overperforming, which is always a good situation to be in. We do want to be closer. We want to hit the mark a little bit closer than we are currently. So we will be addressing this in our mid-buy true up in October. So to look at the retail sales tax by sector, so to just kind of dive into a little bit more detail, you can see the construction sector is still continuing to outperform 2020. In 2020 outperformed 2019, so that construction sector has really remained strong, which is again really indicative of the permitting activity that we've been seeing taking place over the last year and a half. And the construction sales tax is really those permits in action, so it's the actual work being done. Manufacturing, although it's decreased a little from 2020, at least it's leveled out a little bit over the last year and a half. We've seen some pretty significant continual declines. It looks at this point, we've leveled off. We're pretty consistent with 2020, which for the time being, that is good news. I take that as a good indicator for right now. I highlighted transportation and warehousing because I feel like this is a really interesting sector. As you can see, in 2020, we only collected $53,000 year to date in revenue from this sector, and it's increased 237%. And this is entirely attributed to companies like Uber Eats, DoorDash, Instacart, and all those instant delivery services. So it's one of those industries that has really caught fire since COVID, and really just lifestyle changes as a result. Automotive, I highlighted that, really no change again in this sector. I mean, it continues to outperform 2020 and really carry the general retail sales tax. I think, like we all know, just with inventory shortage and demand, car sales dealers are having a hard time keeping cars on the lots. So that is reflective in our retail sales tax that we are seeing in that sector. And then retail trade is also high. And so these are our grocery stores, these are our building materials, these are our clothing stores. All of those retail businesses fall in this retail trade category. And all of the subcategories are up. There's no category that's down. There are a couple that are higher than the others, and that is furniture stores, building material stores, clothing stores, and then online retailing. And online retailing by far carries all the categories, but those 4 categories did see the largest percent increases. And the same thing with services in the others sector. The retail sales could just continue to remain healthy, remain seeing a healthy growth in 2021 over 2020. So utility tax is one of our next largest revenue category. Just a reminder that there's really two types of revenues, utility revenues that are accounted for in the general fund, and that's external utilities, which includes our electric, cable, and telephone tax. The tax rate for those is 6%. 5% of that 6% goes to the general fund. The other 1% goes to our streets. And then we also have a tax on our internal utilities, which is our water, sewer, storm, and solid waste. Those are our city utilities. We increased that internal tax rate, utility tax rate, from 7% to 10% in 2021. 9% goes to the general fund, 1% goes to the arterial streets. In total, we are just slightly under our budget in this category, $94,000 under budget, but that is a huge improvement from where we were with the first quarter. The first quarter really lagged. We were $300,000 behind the year-to-date budget when we ended quarter one. So we are catching up. and we're $218,000 over the prior year. So the reason we are ahead of the prior year is because of the rate increase. We are behind compared to budget because our base utility revenue, particularly our city utilities, has been flat compared to what our projections were for our utilities. A lot of that has to do with the ramp up, businesses coming back online as a result of COVID. We're finally seeing our total revenue sales catch up with the prior year and also 2019, but we had a little bit of a slow start to the year, which is why we're still a little bit behind. But with the way things are moving at this point, we expect to end right on budget, if not maybe a little bit more, just with as quickly as we've been catching up in Q2. So building permits, again, this is tied to that sales tax construction revenue that we've seen. The graph is very dramatic, but remember, these are smaller numbers, so that's why there's bigger gaps when we're looking at it looking like it's way outperformed the budget. We are $395,000 over year-to-date budget and $391,000 above the year-to-date last year. This is the result of more permits being issued. You can see we've issued 252 permits through the end of Q2 this year versus 220 in Q2 in 2020. We have a handful of really large projects that have contributed to the increased permit activity, but two of them were schools, 2 schools that are currently under construction, and the permits on just 2 of those schools is almost half of that 395,000. So it shows how just a couple of large projects can have a really big impact on the total year-to-date budget actual comparison. So intergovernmental revenue, there's several different types of revenues that go into this intergovernmental revenue category. We've got federal, state, local grants, as well as our Muckleshoot Indian Tribe Compact Agreement and state shared revenue. Our state shared revenue is the Streamlined Sales Tax, motor vehicle excise tax, our marijuana and liquor excise taxes, and our criminal justice sales tax, which all of that is a form of sales tax that the state collects, and then they give us a portion of it, essentially at the end of each month. I've asterisked the Streamlined Sales Tax because it just is always a topic of conversation. As you all recall, back in March of 2020, the state had eliminated the city's share of the Streamlined Sales Tax mitigation revenue, which was about a $500,000 reduction to our budget in 2020. And we had originally then anticipated to eliminate about $1 million from our 2021 budget. So we had made an adjustment to our 2021 budget to eliminate that Streamlined Sales Tax revenue. And then we got it again. So at the in the end of Q1, at the beginning of Q2, the state had approved to reinstate that Streamlined Sales Tax mitigation money, and we received our catch-up distribution. I say catch-up because it's not really a true catch-up. We received a little over $1 million at the end of June for our portion of our Streamlined Sales Tax. Still not as much as what we would have normally we had originally budgeted for, but since we had removed it from our budget, it's now $1 million more than what we had that is currently budgeted. So that's what we're seeing in the variances between 2020, 2021. The $902,000 over our year-to-date budget is almost 100% attributed to that, us getting that mitigation tax money back. We're a little over our 2020 year-to-date collections, and that just has to do with slight increases in liquor and marijuana excise tax, also offset by a decrease in motor vehicle excise tax. So it's just some of those little revenues increase, some of them decrease, but in the end, year-to-date, we're $126,000 ahead of our 2020. So charges for services, I had mentioned earlier that we would talk about the four main categories that go into our charges for services category in the general fund. That's general, we break it down between general government, public safety, development services, and culture and recreation. Our general government is $74,000 below budget, but that actually isn't necessarily a bad thing because the general government revenue that we receive is primarily attributed to the money that the general fund charges all of the other funds for their internal services. So that is finance, human resources, legal services. Those are their prorated portion of those costs. 100% of those costs are accounted for in the general fund, but all of the funds citywide are able to take advantage of those services. So we charge back out to those departments. That's based on our staffing costs. So if we aren't fully staffed, or if we don't have those, or if we're realizing savings in our salary and benefit line, those charges are not charged back out to the other departments. So even though we're short revenue in the general fund, that means there's an offsetting expenditure that's also reduced as well. So not necessarily anything we didn't expect to see. Public safety, the biggest piece to this is the off-duty overtime. We have police officers that provide off-duty police services to private businesses, and we then charge those private businesses the cost to it's a reimbursement cost of those off-duty hours. We've had an uptick in our off-duty police hours, and so therefore we've had an increase in the amount of revenue that we've received for that. Development services is tied to, it's very similar, it's tied very closely to our building permits. It's the plan check fees, the facility extension fees, the zoning and subdivision fees that are all tied to those building permits. And we're currently outperforming in this. All the same projects that are driving the increased building permit revenue is also driving the increased development services revenue. Culture and recreation is up $189,000 over budget. Typically, this would be green fees, recreational classes, special events, senior center events, rec teams. But because of COVID, especially through the second quarter, we were really slow to open up a lot of those programs. There were reduced programs and services available. So 72% of all the revenue that we collected through quarter two was attributed to the golf course. So green fees, pro shop revenue. And so I guess it pays to have a golf course for the first time in municipal history. So thanks for supporting the golf course. And all the other programs, although they are through quarter two are less than normal, there's also the offsetting expenditure costs to run those programs are also reduced to the second quarter. So some other highlights, things that that we like to keep our eye on, just to kind of, it's not necessarily general fund, but supports sometimes general fund activity and capital. And that is our real estate excise tax, our transportation impact fees, and our park impact fees. These would all be considered money that we would use for capital type projects. Real estate excise tax is very restricted in the sense that it can be used for certain governmental and municipal buildings and infrastructure projects. And then transportation and park impact fees have to be used on expansion projects. So since they're collected through developers and the projects that developers are doing, that money has to be then reinvested into providing either transportation or park services to serve the enhancements from those developments. So real estate excise tax, again, similar to car sales, housing sales have been high through quarter two, and we have collected $2.2 million so far through quarter two, which is $475,000 more than last year at this time, and we're $1.2 million over the year-to-date budget. So we budgeted actually $2.2 million in REACH for all of 2021, and we have now collected that. Transportation impact fees and park impact fees are both performing over budget, all related to all the same building permit, development service activities, sales tax, construction. They're all tied to the same types of activities, which is why we're also seeing over year-to-date budget compared to what we've actually collected. This is good. One thing that I want to kind of put on the council's radar, though, as far as needs that the city has, is a facilities master plan. I know that it's been a while since we last talked about that, but there were the real estate excise tax, and those are some of the funding that we were considering, at least one of the ways to partially fund some of those really expensive initiatives associated with that, the facilities plan. So it is good that we are collecting more than we had budgeted, but we have lots of priorities that we will be bringing to council in the future, as far as potential ways we could use that money. And other highlights, there hasn't actually, there isn't a lot of big information here, but I wanted to bring it. This is our water revenues versus water sold. And the reason I wanted to bring it was because it's something that we've been watching pretty closely over the last year and a half. When COVID had first hit, a lot of our really large retailers, a lot of our large manufacturers and business, the school district, for instance, a lot of our large water customers were not consuming anymore, or consuming as much water as they had been in the past. And that was kind of having kind of a ripple down effect between our service revenue fees as well as our utility tax revenue. So we've been watching this kind of closely. And if you look at that, the blue line, that is the actual water sold. The green line is the revenue that we collected, but that blue line is the actual water consumed and sold. And you can see that our 2021 consumption is right on line with 2020. Again, especially towards the end of last year, it was really starting to dip, and I'm hopeful again because we are right back on track. And it looks like businesses is starting to get a little bit more back to normal as water consumption goes. That being said, we are still seeing overall a decrease in our commercial consumption and an overall increase in our single family and multifamily consumption. Those are the highlights. Are there any questions?
I'm sorry, I lost for a second there. Councilmember J. Raj. Oops, I didn't unmute myself. Councilmember J. Raj, go ahead.
Councilmember J. Raj, you are unmuted.
Councilmember J. Raj, do you have a question? Okay, I'm not seeing anything from Councilmember J. Raj at this point. His hand is raised. Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That's a really meaty presentation. I'm looking for the right word. Meaty seems good.
I'll take it.
Yeah, and I mean it, like, it was really good. Do you have a sense of why the auto sales have done so well? I'm just curious.
Just my amateur looking at car sales. I mean, my inventory is low. I know that there's a manufacturing slowdown, and I think it just is a supply and demand. You know, there was pent up demand from when they were closed down for a month and a half. And then there just was never a catch up in actual product and production, and people still need cars. And so I don't think that there's necessarily any deals, at least global deals on car sales. So I think not only are they being, I wouldn't say at a premium in all cases, but with cars being sold at least at retail, if not a little bit above retail, and then pretty much every car being sold, that's really what's driving those automobile sales.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Councilor J. Raj, go ahead.
Thank you. For a moment, my audio cut off. Jamie, I do have a question. Thank you for the presentation. That was very good. The water revenues that was sold to the big businesses were lower. Did we see a rise in the residential area?
Yes, it's starting to correct a little bit. But we started seeing that actually right at the beginning of the pandemic. There was a big shift in a reduction in the commercial, and then an uptick in single family and multifamily usage. Not enough to offset the commercial usage, but there was an uptick there, and it's remained a little bit higher too, comparatively. But you bring up a good point. In our residential usage, we also have increased our residential delinquent account balances at the same time. So I think that there's more people staying home, higher usage, but then on the same time, I think there's a multitude of reasons why we are dealing with many more delinquent accounts than we have in the past.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
Okay, Council, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Any other questions for Jamie this evening? Okay, Jamie, thank you very much for the in-depth report, and great job on keeping us going financially. So appreciate it very much. Thank you. Okay, Council, we will now move into our community wellness discussion items. We have one item this evening, and for that portion of the meeting, I will turn this over to Councilmember Molinga.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor DeCoursey. We have on the agenda resolution number 5622, and I'd like to ask Director Tate to come up and speak about this, please.
Good evening. So unfortunately, Director Tate was unable to make it this evening. My name is Joy Scott, and I'm the Community Services Manager here with the city. Even though Jeff wasn't able to present this evening, I'm really excited to be here tonight in his stead to introduce this presentation from Angela. Angela Sanfilippo is the Executive Manager of the South King Housing and Homelessness Partners, or SKIP. I have the great pleasure of working really closely with Angela and SKIP as Auburn's representative on the staff work group. She and her team, along with the executive board, have done really excellent work in the past few months to finalize the 2020 work plan and the budget for SKIP. A lot of what you're going to hear tonight may be familiar to you, as Angela presented a draft of the SKIP work plan and budget priorities at your May 10th study session, so it may be some repeat of information or a refresher. Angela is going to provide more information on the great work that's been happening, but staff is recommending that resolution 5622, which is found in your packet, be scheduled for a vote at next week's council meeting. So I'll pass it over to Angela.
Thanks so much, Joy. Good evening, Deputy Mayor DeCoursey and council members. Angela Sanfilippo, Executive Manager with South King Housing and Homelessness Partners. I am going to share my screen, so give me just 1 second. My computer is thinking really hard about that. There we go. All right, so as Joy said in her introduction, I am going to walk through the SKIP 2022 work plan and budget as it has been approved by the SKIP Executive Board earlier this summer. little bit about our process. Our process has been to draft priorities with our staff work group, as well as the SCIP Executive Board, and conduct outreach and receive feedback from all of our partner jurisdictions, leading to a draft work plan and budget adopted in July by our Executive Board. And then, consistent with our SCIP interlocal agreement, each partner's legislative body also needs to adopt the SCIP annual work plan and budget. And that is what brings us here tonight. And we will be taking this to all of our SCIP partner councils over the next few weeks or so. Brief overview of the SCIP mission that is included in the work plan. This is a broad, high-level description of SCIP's purpose to work together and share resources to create a coordinated, comprehensive, and equitable approach to increasing housing stability, reducing homelessness, and producing and preserving affordable housing in South King County. In order to achieve this mission, we've identified 3 primary objectives that then are broken down further in the work plan. Those 3 primary objectives are sharing technical information and resources across our jurisdiction partners to promote housing policy, also coordinating public resources that will help us to attract greater private investment for affordable housing across the South King County subregion. And then the third objective is to provide a unified voice to advocate for South King County housing needs at a local, regional, and state level. In terms of our work plan, I wanted to provide a little bit of an overview in terms of the work plan itself, with reoccurring work plan items, as well as areas of ongoing focus, and then some key priorities for 2022 that are new. So in terms of our reoccurring annual work plan items, you'll see this broken up in 3 different kind of bucket areas. The first being around our governance and administration, and that includes this annual work plan and budget process that we're going through right now. Also includes quarterly progress and budget reports that are provided to the Executive Board, and then as well as our partner councils. And then also annual updates to stakeholder groups, as well as non-SCIP South King County partner cities, to give folks that may not be a part of SCIP an idea of the work that we're doing. This also includes a bucket of work around policy and planning, building funding support for the SCIP Housing Capital Fund, as well as supporting policies and strategies across our jurisdictions that address displacement, fair housing, and healthy housing. And including within that are housing policies and strategies that embed and track racial equity. And then also convening a group of South King County city and county land use planners as they work on their housing action plans, moving towards implementation of those housing action plans, and then upcoming in the next few years, their comprehensive plan updates. So this is in addition to the staff work group that we convene to move the work of SCIP forward. And this is really primarily focused on the land use planning side. And then that last bucket of work is around outreach and education. And this includes representing SCIP at local and regional forums and discussion groups. This includes monthly Executive Board educational topics to stay abreast of emerging housing issues. Also includes education and engagement opportunities for a broader audience of elected officials, stakeholder groups, and members of the public. Each year, we also adopt state and federal legislative priorities that help us with that advocacy component that I went over in the objectives. And then this also includes convening a group of South King County joint planners and developers. This really provides a collaborative space for our human service planners, as well as land use planners across South King County, to interact with and coordinate with affordable housing developers in the area. And they meet every other month throughout the year. In terms of areas of ongoing focus that I wanted to highlight, We are establishing a SCIP advisory board this year. A lot of work has gone into outreach and recruitment of advisory board applicants. And our executive board actually took action at our meeting just last Friday to appoint inaugural advisory board members. So we will be working on an onboarding and orientation of those members this year. We've also been working very hard on establishing the SCIP Housing Capital Fund and an administrative plan and structure so that we can work towards our goal of going through our first funding round in 2022. And then this also includes that funding support. So things that we have been working on this year and will continue to work on in 2022 include establishing a SCIP nonprofit fundraising arm. We did in August receive our Washington nonprofit status, and we are working towards a 501c3 recognition with the federal government. This also includes developing marketing materials and a case study, why we need that private investment, private and philanthropic investment into the SCIP Housing Capital Fund and that fundraising branch. So that will be work that our SCIP Foundation and our SCIP Executive Board continues to work on throughout the remainder of this year and moving forward into 2020 as well. This also includes coordinating with developers to better understand barriers to increasing construction of affordable housing. This really plays into that South King County Joint Planners and Developers Group and the space that we have for coordination amongst our planners and developers in the subregion. We also are working on developing preservation program opportunities for affordable rental and ownership housing. We will be coordinating with our South King County partners to apply for Housing Action Plan implementation grant funds to help move this area of work forward. And this includes the inventory and monitoring component for affordable housing that's vulnerable to market pressures. In terms of the key additional areas of work for the 2022 SCIP work plan and budget, in our budget, you will see that the jurisdiction contributions have been increased for the first time since SCIP was formed in 2019. This is to include 2 full-time positions, both the position of executive manager and the program coordinator, which is currently a 3/4-time position. It also includes a line item for compensation structure for our SCIP advisory board members. While we do have a line item in the budget, we do need further work to develop the structure of what that looks like, but this gives us the opportunity to pursue that structure and eventually work towards compensation for our advisory board members. And then in terms of the work plan itself, in 2022, we want to implement strategic planning. We look at our annual planning cycle and the importance of really developing 3 to 5 year strategic goals and objectives that will aid that annual work plan item of work in our governance and administration, but it also will help us track our progress and accountability to achieving our SCIP mission and objectives. This also includes partnering with organizations and area experts, specifically around educational opportunities to help better understand the connections between SCIP's mission and the homelessness services, outreach, and best practices. And then lastly, thinking about using an equity lens for the development and implementation of all aspects of our work plan. I'm very excited to say that we have an advisory board that has been appointed, and we will be working with them to really work towards this equity lens in all aspects of the SCIP work plan. And it's really important for us to have those community voices as part of this process, representing voices that are not currently part of our decision-making process, and really have deep ties into the South King County region and the populations that are most impacted by the housing crisis in the area. With that, I will stop sharing and turn it back over to you, Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Hi, I'm the one leading.
Oh, I'm
Angela.
sorry. Sorry about that.
Okay. So we have a couple of questions from our council members. So I saw Councilmember Stern's hands, and then after he finishes, Councilmember Baggett.
Thanks, Angela. That was really good. I apologize if I'm missing something here, but for the life of me, I actually couldn't find the work plan.
I will look through your packet. It should have been included in that packet,
I'm
but
just
I
going
can
off
make
what's
sure that you
online.
all have it. Yeah. Let me look on there. I think you're right. It did not get attached. So I will make sure you all, I don't see it on your agenda. My apologies for that.
Okay,
So
thanks. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what the best way I can coordinate with staff, the best way to get that out to all of you. It was adopted by resolution, and I can include the work plan as well as the budget there. I apologies for that.
Thanks.
We can get it sent out, Council. Angela, if you send it to Sean, Sean can send it out.
Councilmember Baggett.
Councilmember Baggett, you're still muted.
Thank you. I had something else on my screen that popped up and it was blocking my mute. Anyway, I have a couple of questions, and I want to preface those questions with the fact that I do not mean to be disrespectful of the executive manager or any of the advisory board or executive board members. I may incur some wrath from our mayor, but I really do want to ask some questions about it seems to me, and not having seen anything that tells me that any of this money is going towards homelessness. It's basically just planning, and we're hiring people, and we're developing budgets. And I don't see that any of that money is going out to really remedy the affordable housing or the homeless problems that our city is facing. And it just seems to me like we're hiring people, we're providing money from 9 different cities to actually fund the salaries of a executive manager, 2 full-time employees, and now possible compensation of an advisory board. I really would like to see something that shows where we're going with this and how is this really going to benefit our affordable housing and our homelessness situation. Because, you know, we can plan and plan and plan, and I know that you have a work plan, but that's all I'm seeing is planning and coordination with other like developers and things of that nature. But that isn't really helping our problem. Our problem is now. We have a major problem out there, and I don't see where this is really benefiting us. For the last several years, we have been collecting money from these 9 cities, and it seems like we're just gunny sacking funds to be used to pay for salaries and compensation and planning. So can you enlighten me a little bit? I really hope you can, and maybe stem the tide on maybe some other questions I may have later.
Councilmember Malenga, I would like to respond.
Yes, Mayor Backus.
Thank you. Councilmember Baggett, the South King Housing and Homeless Partners was created to address the issues specifically around affordable housing and also homelessness. However, that work is not done without FTEs in those roles to do that work. The initial budgets that were put together from the 9 member cities were to hire an executive manager, as well as originally a part-time employee to assist, and then finally bringing that person on full time to represent all 9 cities, to attend all of the housing and affordability meetings throughout this region. The goal is to be similar to Arch, which is on the east side at some point, and have a capital fund that will allow for funding for affordable housing within any one of the 9 cities. But that does not happen without a great deal of work, without a great deal of planning. And the budgets that have been approved, in fact, I believe our city council approved the interlocal agreement and the budget initially. The understanding was that you have to have employees to do this work, otherwise the work doesn't get done. We don't have the employee resources within the city of Auburn to do this. We happen to be the city that is the administrating city, so we do collect those funds from the other cities, but that money goes to SCIP specifically. Auburn is a contributor to SCIP, as is Kent, as is Federal Way and other cities. So there has to be a plan in place for us to follow. If you try and do work without having a plan in place, we are going to fail miserably. This is not a design build. We have to have a plan in place that is going to allow us to understand who we need to partner with in order to get additional funding. The House bill dollars that we were able to, $1490 that we have agreed that will be put into the SCIP fund. There are other capital funds that we will be going for that will help build affordable housing in the future. This is not something that is done overnight, and the compensation for potential advisory board members was discussed in great detail by the board members. It is kind of split at this point as to whether there should be funding provided for individuals to be compensated for being on this board. And there, I don't believe, Angela, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe there has been a set amount for any compensation. It is simply still a talking point for future possible action and funding. But there is a great deal of work that is being done. Angela and Trish do great work, and it goes on throughout the month. Again, attending all of these different meetings throughout the region that help on affordable housing. Homelessness, yes, affordable housing was our first priority, and that continues to be the first priority. We have other organizations that will focus more attention on homelessness, but SCIP is mainly for affordable housing with homelessness as another priority.
How does the capital funds that were being developed and maintained actually get applied to affordable housing?
Angela, do you want to go through how that process works?
Sure, yeah. So Councilmember Baggett, I think Mayor Backus did a nice job of answering your question, but I will just acknowledge in these early years, there is a lot of planning and administrative setup to get an organization off of the ground. So I just want to recognize that and acknowledge that you're right. There is a lot of planning that goes into this. In terms of the Housing Capital Fund, part of the work that we needed to do to get that fund going is to receive commitment from all of our SCIP partner cities to pool those funds together and then set up an administrative structure, finance structure within the city of Auburn, which we're actually still working on because it is fairly complicated to set up accounts for each of those individual partners. But in terms of how those funds get distributed, that's part of the work that was so important to get the advisory board on board, is because our interlocal agreement actually identifies the advisory board as the recommending body for funding or resource allocations. So the advisory board would make a recommendation, and that goes to the SCIP executive board for their actual approval. And then each of the cities that have put forward funds into a project would need that final say. So while they have committed those 1406, sales tax credit revenues at this point. If they're funding a specific project, they would have final say over that project towards the end of that process. So that's a fairly simplified version of what the actual decision-making process looks like. There's a lot of staff review and work along the way to work with applicants to make sure that they are meeting our affordability requirements and priorities that the SCIP Executive Board will be putting into play. But that's a little bit of a simplified version of what that process will look like.
Are we actually looking to subsidize the developers? Is that what this looks like as we move down the road?
So in terms of the 1406 funds are pretty, there's a pretty defined structure within the state legislature of how those funds can be spent. And it really is around capital funds for affordable housing. So we will be subsidizing affordable housing projects. We can't build a project on our own. Even pooled, our funds amount to about $1 million per year. So we'll be looking at providing gap funding for projects or local match for much larger pots of funds from state or federal sources. But it is a way for us to leverage those local funds into much greater investment into South King County.
Well, according to our work plan that we're going to be seeing, does that actually indicate a schedule or some kind of a plan for when we will be distributing some of this money to do the affordable housing?
It doesn't include an identified schedule per se, but it does include the first round of our funding cycle to happen in 2022. The executive board has gone through quite a bit of work to put forward a schedule that they have been working on that would be part of kind of a full package of structure for that housing capital fund, but it isn't in our 2022 work plan at this point. And I would just say it's a long process for the applications. We will be working with the joint funders application, which comes out usually in July each year. So we would be looking at applications in July, thereabouts of 2022 to give you an idea of schedule.
Yeah, I appreciate your presentation, and I understand it does take people, as the mayor said, to develop these plans and move forward. But I'm still concerned about the funding and the building up of this advisory board and compensation and all of those different things as to where that money is really being spent. But I will, forestall any other questions at this time and allow my other colleagues to bring their questions to the fore. Thank you.
I think we have a question now from Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Just a comment, Councilmember Linga. Councilmember Baggett and Council, Angela is a participant in all of our King County Affordable Housing Committee meetings. And the King County Affordable Housing Committee has recognized SCIP as playing a key role in helping to develop affordable housing. You've heard me say it many times before, and I will repeat it again. Through the year 2040, through the year 2040, King County Affordable Housing Committee has identified 244,000 units needed in the county, which includes the 9-member cities of SCIP. Between the years 2019 and 2024, it was identified that 44,000 of those units needed to be built and or preserved with a price tag of $18 billion. The shortfall of funding is massive. We've had some good results from Amazon and from Microsoft being partners in providing funding for affordable housing. There were still many billions of dollars short of meeting those goals. For SCIP, with the 9-member cities, $1 million is not going to do anything. It's going to take leveraging of those funds on all aspects in order to raise significant capital to be able to meet the demand and the needs we have in South County for affordable housing. So it is going to take some time. I've been a vocal advocate, if you'll I'll use that term, for giving us a measurement on where we are with the 44,000 units. And we will probably not have a report from King County staff on that until either later this year or perhaps early next year in relation to where we are from 2019 to the current of how many of those units have been built and or preserved. So again, it's an undaunting task of coming up with the capital in order to meet the needs we have in our cities, including the 9-member cities in South County. And it's going to take a tremendous effort, not only on Angela's part, but also the 9-member cities and the advisory board in order to really develop the plan going forward with timelines of where we can build, who gets the I guess say the first out of the chute dollars to meet the needs they have in their cities, and where do we go forward and trying to come up with enough capital to meet the demand overall of building the housing. And keep in mind again, as we said before, the greatest need is 50% and under AMI, with the biggest need being the highly subsidized housing, which is the 0 to 30%, which, by the way, developers are not really interested in building very much. It doesn't pencil out for them. So we've got to create those public-private partnerships in order to be able to meet these objectives going forward. So just want to remind everybody again, the King County Affordable Housing Committee is working tirelessly on this as well, which includes Angela as part of SCIP, as part of the King County Affordable Housing Committee. Thank you.
And the plan has been emailed to you, Council. Sean just emailed it.
Thank you, Mayor Backus. Councilmember Stearns and then Councilmember Troutman.
Thank you, Council Member Malenga. And thank you, Deputy Mayor DeCoursey. Those are really important words, and I'm glad to just hear how important this is, and for all your work on this issue. And Angela, I was speaking of the capital fund. I really have no idea. Maybe you could tell me how big does it need to get, or how big do you anticipate the capital fund growing?
That's a good question. I can say at this point with our public dollars, I mentioned the 1406 funds, with all of this 9 cities pooling their funds, it's about $1 million per year. To date, we've been collecting for just about 2 years. Each city is a little bit different in terms of when they started collecting. But really the intention for us is to supplement those funds with private and philanthropic investments. So that really brings us to that SCIP 501c3 and the foundation that was just recently created, because that enables us to really apply for additional funds through grants and through philanthropy that would not otherwise be able to donate funds without that nonprofit status. With that just coming on board, I don't have a specific answer, and just to say that we really do hope to grow that, so that we are really leveraging those public dollars in the best and most efficient way that we can. And that really led us to that creation of the nonprofit to be able to do that. We're really recognizing that we can't do this alone. Public dollars really only go so far. Our local dollars are much smaller than the state and federal funds, but state and federal funds also have been diminishing over the past several years. So thinking about more innovative ways and partnership opportunities in our region, because we do have some very large employers and large philanthropic institutions that can be part of this solution. So that really is the intent of the SCIP Foundation, is to grow the Housing Capital Fund in a way that will really leverage those public resources.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Troutman.
Thank you, Councilmember Malenga. Angela, who is keeping the inventory of the housing? I know that we're short all over the place. And so I was just kind of curious, because you have a statement on here, affordable rental and owner ship housing. So could you kind of give us an idea and who's housing the inventory?
Yeah, so that is something that we will be working on. I mentioned we'll be applying for Housing Action Plan implementation funds with some of our partner cities. So it is a work in progress at this point, but the inventory would include both the regulated affordable housing, those that might have affordability requirements through a funding source, or affordability requirements from a property tax exemption, like the multifamily tax exemption program that's in place in a lot of our cities, or other types of policy incentives or things that might be in play. But the intention here is to also include the unregulated affordable housing. So there's a lot of different ways that we can look at the unregulated affordable housing. So these are properties that may be affordable just because they're maybe a bit older. They're not, in some cases, unfortunately, they're more substandard type of housing, but in a lot of cases are really vulnerable to redevelopment and really important in terms of our preservation efforts in South King County. So the intention here is to build that inventory. Like I said, this is a work in progress and something that Skip with our staff would be implementing that and carrying forward the administration of that program long term.
Okay, thank you very much.
Joy, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of the discussion and really important questions. And I just wanted to add in, because I don't think that Angela will, perhaps out of humility, some of the value add that we see as city staff of SCIP. I know that we all are really eager to see projects funded and to see things rise really quickly from the ground up. But one of the primary pieces why staff across South King County cities worked so hard to come together to support SCIP standing up is because most of us in human services and on the planning side really are generalists in the work that we do. We know some about a lot of different things, but the world of affordable housing, especially development and finance and affordable housing policy, is incredibly complex and really takes experts to be able to craft that. So there are policies that have come before Auburn City Council that wouldn't have come before you as efficiently or as well formed as they did without the support that SCIP is providing to staff and that individual expertise. We are having spaces facilitated where we can share best practices across cities, and we're working more efficiently as a region, as well as having a stronger voice region-wide. And while the money won't go out the door until next year for these projects, we've made great strides individually as South King County cities in advancing policy that supports affordable housing coming into our communities. The Housing Action Plan was supported by the work of SCIP, and I think that as we see huge state legislative changes with bills like 1220, which require a lot of work from staff to be able to respond to new state laws, those are things that are so necessary to have somebody who's an expert in this work, because we just don't know the minutia of that. So I just wanted to highlight, because it's not as at the forefront as kind of new buildings are, but a lot of the work of affordable housing development happens in the policy realm in cities. And that work is happening for us and for other South King County cities because of the support of the SCIP staff. So I just wanted to highlight that as well.
Thank you, Joy. Mayor Backus.
Thank you, Councilmember Malinga, and I will applaud Joy for those remarks. Thank you, Joy, and the work that you do as well. It's incredibly important. Just one thing that I failed to mention is when the King County Regional Homelessness Authority was being stood up, and we're talking about sub-regional planning, SCIP is looked at as the potential recipient of some of those funds that the Regional Homelessness Authority will be allocating out at some future point. So they're looking at the entities, like I said, on the east side, it's Arch, who are far more mature in their program and their organization than we are in South King County. But our goal is to be utilizing those capital funds within the member cities for affordable housing. It's just unfortunately not that we all get together 1 month and 2 or 3 months later, everything is in place. With no offense to our city attorney, even the ILA, the interlocal agreement that was signed initially, took months to put in place. Many of the council members, I know that you attended some of the meetings when we were talking about even starting SKIP and getting the other cities to agree to be involved. Some of the smaller cities, I'll be honest with you, don't have anyone dedicated on their staff for affordability or homelessness. And so SKIP also provides that role. It allows for more people to be out and about, to be in different committees and different organizations, and still have the voice of South King County as an important voice in those discussions. So Joy is absolutely right. Angela is not going to say those things about herself, but she is a respected member on those boards and committees and the working groups. And I'm really proud of the work that's being done by SKIP. We would all love to be able to blink our eyes and have funding readily available. We are doing something similar, as you are aware, because you just recently approved Auburn being a member for SHAPE, South Sound Housing and Affordability Partners, which is the Pierce County sister, if you will, or relative of SKIP. And there are a lot of members of SHAPE who are thinking, well, by middle of next year, we should be able to be spending money on housing. I'm not going to try and stomp on anyone's ideals, but I will be shocked if that is the case. This takes a while to build up the funding, to submit the grant applications and other things that are going to be required for us to have enough funding to do these capital projects.
Thank you, Mayor Backus. Angela, great presentation. I don't see any other hands. Just one last time for the council members. Okay, thank you, Angela. I appreciate you coming out tonight. I want to turn it back over to Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Councilmember Malinga. All right, Council, we have any other discussion items this evening? Any new business to cover? All right, Council, we do have need for an executive session this evening. So we are going to recess onto an executive session, which includes the mayor, city attorney, police chief, and council to discuss potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, subsection 1I. The executive session is expected to last 20 minutes. We are recessed into executive session.
And Council, you should all have that link in your email. Please log out of this meeting and log into that one. We will extend the executive session by 20 minutes. Council, if you're present, if you could turn your cameras back on for me.
All right, we will call the City Council study session back to order. And having no other business to conduct this evening, we are now adjourned. Have a good evening.